In the end of the last millennium, 1 in 100 people would have had ADHD or diagnosed with ADHD. Fast track to 2013, 2014, the figures are up, around 10%. The only things that have changed in such a rapid time are vaccines and food. Not really getting the solutions because the causes aren't being really discussed transparently enough. Vaccines have gone from children maybe having polio to now having 70. We have a gene makeup. If something disrupts it or expresses it, suddenly you've got this soup of symptoms that might have been dormant your whole life. But now because you've activated it with a gene expressor, being either a food or a vaccine, you're now dealing with the fallout. I sold vaccines. I was in the pharmaceutical industry for 8.5, 9 years. In the space that they're being launched, there has not been enough.
Welcome to the ADHD Fempreneur Podcast, where we unleash the power of the ADHD entrepreneurial mind. I'm Kerry Fitzgibbon. Ladies, let's turn your superpower into success. Welcome to this week's episode of the ADHD Fempreneur. I have celebrity naturopath Sam Beau-Patrick, also a really, really good friend of mine. And we've spent the last few months actually really unpacking ADHD and what it means for us as females, as business owners. So I thought I would bring Sam along today, and thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
And we're also going to unpack quite a big serious topic. And it's just so wonderful that you're bringing this to the world. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So tell me about your take on ADHD and I guess why, we're hearing a lot more about it nowadays. It seems that every second person has ADHD. What do you think's going on in the world there?
Yeah, so the statistics are, and for those who don't know me, I do have a background in nursing for many years. I was also in pharmaceuticals for 9 years and more recently 20 years as a naturopath and a nutritionist. So over that time, obviously, lots of education, particularly around pharmaceuticals, the impact they have on the body, physiology, also the other spectrum of being a nurse, nursing people with these issues, and also now as a naturopath and trying to get people a better understanding about what happens in their body when they do certain behaviours. Now, one of the seminars I went to, it would have been 2014, and it was called the 4As. It was called Asperger's, ADHD, autism and asthma. So it's called the 4As. Now it's just called spectrum disorders. Asthma's not included in there, but it was in this particular seminar. And the reason being, it went for 3 days in Melbourne. It was one of the best 3 days conferences or seminars that I've been to. We had the world's best professors in there. And the information that they delivered was just cutting edge. They specialise in ADHD globally, or the 4As. And their findings are irrefutable. They're medical specialists, but also as a naturopath and nutritionist, it made so much sense.
Yeah. And so tell me, what were some of the findings that they found as to why, I guess people are on the spectrum? Us ADHDers out there have this executive, dysfunction, I guess.
Gift. Let's call it a gift.
And that's actually true. For many, it's a gift. I think personally everyone wants to be ADHD out there now.
Yeah.
To a certain extent until they've got it. But tell me why, what were the findings?
Well, yeah, so the statistics at that point were that in the end of the last millennia, so 1998, 99, 1 in 100 people would have had ADHD or diagnosed with ADHD. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't others who had it that weren't diagnosed. In fast track to 2013, 2014, I can't remember when the conference was, but 1 in 10 with a report, or 1 in 11. And now we know the figures are up, around 10%. So it's 10 in 100 people. It's a huge, staggering figure of people who can't assimilate everyday living. Now, the only things that have changed in such a rapid time, there's two factors, and this is what came out with the medical literature, vaccines and food. Those are the things that have changed radically in the human species and what people are consuming and doing with their bodies over the last 50 years. And in fact, vaccines have gone from, children maybe having polio to maybe a couple of others in the 70s and 80s to now having 70. Kids are being offered 70 before the age of 14. So, that obviously is having an impact, and the specialists are saying this. Yet I think there's some countries who don't acknowledge it. The one we live in really doesn't, but that's not an issue. I think when people are looking for solutions, they'll go and do their own research. Yeah.
Yeah. So if and this is a really controversial topic, we know this, and we know this for years, and that vaccines and even food with ADHDers, because there's many ADHDers that will say, people will say out there, hey, listen, you've got to fix up your diet, not do this, not do that and whatnot. And there are people out there that say, yeah, I've done that and it doesn't work. Maybe they haven't done it enough. But let's go vaccine, right?
Yes.
Let's touch on that for a moment. Because one of the things I've noticed since I was diagnosed, had it my entire life, only got diagnosed about a year ago.
Right.
It makes everything, it makes sense now. Everything makes sense. But one of my suspicions, because I'm seeing a lot of people from New Zealand, which is my native country, I think we were like the testing ground for vaccines.
Right.
Often small
the
countries
petri dish.
The petri dish for vaccines. There's so many New Zealanders coming out with ADHD now and and so tell me about what you think with the vaccine side of things, because that was one of my suspicions. When I reckon it's the vaccines.
Yeah. Now, this is a very hot topic, very controversial. I don't want you getting hate mail. I certainly don't want any hate mail. Direct it elsewhere, please. But certainly, I sold vaccines. I was in the pharmaceutical industry for 8.5, 9 years, and I worked for the big companies who sold vaccines. That was my role, so I know them pretty well. There has not been, in the space that they're being launched, enough longitudinal data. And the most recent one, the COVID vaccine, has still at a phase 3. So with a pharmaceutical agent, it goes through 4 phases. The first one is, does it have any impact at all on, is there a benefit? It might be a plant substrate or it might be a chemical discovery. Is there any benefit? 2, can we emulate this? 3, let's take it to human population, see what happens. Let's collect adverse events and see if we make it to a phase 4. And phase 4 is when you get large population cohorts and see what it does in that part. Now, the most recent vaccines that everyone's talking about, is it still at phase 3? It hasn't even got to phase 4. And I suspect in 30 years' time we'll go, oh, my God. But, we haven't even done that with a lot of the other vaccines like Gardasil. So Gardasil's one for HPV, human papillomavirus. It's been around now. I think it launched maybe early 2000s, pushed out in schools en masse for young girls and young boys. The side effects reported to the CDC, which is an offshoot of the FDA, are massive. So it's not surprising we're seeing this massive rise in my understanding of what ADHD is, how genes can be activated by vaccines. So that's a really key point. We have a gene makeup, like our DNA. If something really what's the word? Disrupts it. Yeah, that's a good word. Disrupts it or expresses it. So that means switches it on. Suddenly you've got this soup of symptoms that have been activated that might have been dormant your whole life, that may have never had an impact. But now because you've activated it with a gene expressor, being either a food or a vaccine, you're now dealing with the fallout, which is the toxic soup of terrible adverse events. And people are not really getting the solutions because the causes aren't being really discussed transparently enough.
Yeah. And I can understand why it would be a subject that no one really wants to go down the path of. Because what if, that is the cause of it? Let's just say, they're saying it is. Some studies out there.
Plenty of professors are saying it is.
Then it didn't need to happen, essentially. But in saying that, though, maybe they've done a great thing, because ADHD can be great and it can be a superpower.
Yes.
And,
we've created all these super gifted people.
Yeah. That can't function in day-to-day life. But so tell me what you think about like the food and how food affects, the symptoms and, and what impact that is happening on us ADHDers.
Yeah, okay, so we've got to loop back to something called MTHFR at the end of this, but foods are not all safe. Like we know there are mushrooms that you can take that can bump you off. We know that we know that there's things the plant realm or the plant genome, the whole species of plants. There's beneficial ones, medicinal ones, some that have great nutrients for our body, and the whole understanding of plants is really being unpacked. And there's a lot of folklore now. If you go back 100 years, you and I would have been catching up. We might have had some ancient wine. We might have had
guaranteed,
yes, some fruit and some veggies, and maybe an animal that had just been culled, or if we were choosing to be vegetarian, maybe not. Now, in the space of 100 years, we've now got faux foods. We've got faux meats. We've got chemicals used in foods like I've I've seen in my lifetime change. So an apple pie when I was 7 years old just had apple, sugar, flour that was milled, butter, and that was it. That was our apple pie. But now an apple pie, if you go to the frozen section of a supermarket, an apple pie's got 20 different ingredients, and 4 of which were the key things, but they're not even the main ingredients half the time. So we're bombarding our body with things that are not foods. So to think that a burger from, big mainstream burger joint, no names mentioned, but there's a couple of them, and you can sit that down for 6 weeks and it won't even go off. That's happening because it's not a food. That's happening because it's got chemicals in it that's permitting it to last longer and taste better. And those chemicals, the synthetic ones, even the natural additives, have a major impact on how our genes respond, how our gut wall responds, and how agitated our brain gets from those foods.
Because that's one of the things I've heard quite often is that, your mental clarity and everything comes from the gut, doesn't it? It's what you put into your gut and how the gut responds to that. So if you're putting all these chemicals in, of course, that's going to go up into your brain and cause perhaps more heightened issues.
Exactly. So they call the gut the little tummy, the second brain or the little brain. And at the gut wall, there's a lot of neuro links that have a direct link from here up to my brain. So if I put something in there that my body's not comfortable with, it's going to agitate my nervous system incredibly. Now, a couple of the big offenders, and this came out with these professors, were casein. So that's the protein in dairy.
Yeah,
that can be a real problem, and maybe New Zealand also has that issue because it's a dairy country like this country. But also gluten. So glutamates. So gluten is a protein that's found on 4 different grains. It's highly inflammatory. We know it affects people's guts, head, and skin. So when I explain gluten sensitivity to people, it doesn't have to be an allergy. It can just be an intolerance or a sensitivity. I say to them it's going to affect you generally your head or your gut or your skin. Now, if it affects the gut, kids get amped,
Yeah, you see it all the time,
Yeah, you see them come, teachers will tell you, they come in from morning tea and they can't sit down and concentrate, and that's often gluten stimulating them. As we get older, we get, we can't concentrate, or we get dulled emotions, or we get headaches and migraines.
That's exactly what I'm finding.
Right. You're seeing the clusters of what's happening with people. Yeah, and it's... So those foods are agitating, but there's also other naturally occurring substrates in foods such as salicylates, nitrates, amines, oxalates that can also do that. I know, right? I know.
So what as ADHDers, what type of food or what diet should we be following?
Filtered water.
Filtered water, and that's it.
Yeah, no.
Definitely no red wine.
No, red wine's fine. But, but even the histamines and the sulphur in red wine can have adverse
organic.
Organic, but they can impact on people negatively. So let me just bubble out for a minute and talk about MTHFR.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so MTHFR is a gene that certain people have, and once again, it may not be expressed, and they might go through their whole life without it being expressed, but then certain factors may bring that on, such as vaccines, foods, stress, and suddenly that gene becomes active.
Yeah.
So you might have a genetic makeup that looks pretty bad on paper, but it may not be an issue if these genes lay dormant.
Yep.
Now, with MTHFR, there's 2 different sorts, and it's not necessarily my lane, but I've been looking for it a lot lately because the last 2 years with the COVID vaccine rollouts, there have been a lot of adverse events, and all those people are MTHFR positive.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think, and now that I'm kind of, because I've come from a pharmaceutical background, I've been a little bit like, I don't really want to go too deep in the mosh pit. But now I'm understanding that people who have that gene makeup are more predisposed to having adverse events.
So your ADHD is and your autism and your,
Very high association.
Yep.
There's also really high association with pyrroles, which is another chemical that the body naturally produces, but in ADHDers, very high, huge correlation.
Yeah.
So once people have this understanding that that's how their body is vulnerable, they can make means to, navigate it, to avoid certain lifestyle decisions. And you were asking about what people can eat.
Yeah.
I'm a fan for everybody eating clean. So rather than getting the apple pie from the frozen section, make an apple pie. I mean, we're told butter's bad and sugar's bad, but if you can get a gluten-free flour or in the EU, in Europe, a lot of their flours don't have a lot of gluten. So pure, clean food. Shop at the veggie markets. Get stacks of veggies, make heaps of salads, stir fries, steamed veggies. Pure, if you are not vegetarian, then eat pure meats. You know, don't get the ones that have been jammed with hormones and antibiotics. Try and find a butcher who sources and grows their animals responsibly, culled, nicely, as nice as it can be, straight from paddock to plate, as much as you can. So it sounds a bit boring because it takes out soft drinks, it takes out burgers, it takes out a lot of fast food.
Yeah. And I think probably for us ADHD is our one of our issues with, I guess, clean eating and stuff is it takes time and it takes a thought process. And the thought process is I've got to now go down to a market and I've got to go and buy this stuff and then I've got to come back and then I've got to prepare it and the brain does not.
Fries.
So it's just easier. And especially like, a medicated ADHD quite often, and this is not always the case, but a medicated one you can forget to eat. Or you're so focused that you forget to eat. So you get to the stage at the end of the day, it's 3 o'clock and you haven't eaten all day and the headache comes in like crazy because there's no water, no food, and you just grab, and you know what it is, so you grab whatever you can, and it's got to be quick and convenient. Yeah. So, that's...
it can be a catch-22, and I think if that's the experience people are having, to slow it down. Yeah. To go, right, I don't need to and get so far ahead. It's like, no, the first instruction was... Go to the markets.
Yeah, go to the markets.
Yeah, just find myself at the markets.
Or get someone to do it for you.
Or get someone to do it for you.
Or make it fun. Like, because you and I went to, I've never been, these markets that we've got, farmers markets, I've never been, ever.
Yeah.
Right? We went for the first time a couple of months ago and I've walked into this place and I bought all the stuff. It was great. And saying that though, only half of it got eaten.
Right, yeah.
But we made it a fun occasion.
Yeah, and I think it's such a joy going to markets if you do have ADHD because suddenly you go, ooh.
Oh, yeah, no, totally.
And the things you're buying, like if a buying surge is where you get your dopamine hit, then why not go to a organic or a farmer's market and get great produce?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
It makes
so much tastier.
So much better, lasts longer. So I think the first thing, if it's an instructional thing, is just get to the markets, buy good food.
Yep.
Second, it doesn't need to be new recipes each time. Find 2 things I like cooking and stick to it. Spin, rinse, repeat, spin, rinse, repeat.
Well, actually, that's another thing, and I know a few other ADHDers out there are the same, as you actually find something you really like and you will eat it, or that'll be the go-to, and that will last about a month or 2 months, and then you'll get so sick of it you can't look at it again and you'll be on to the next. So it's actually really easy. Like, just find the meal that you really like and just eat it until you're sick of it.
As long as it's not burgers and soft drink.
As long as it's not burgers and soft drink.
Yeah. So I think it's really important, particularly if people have, if they've got the knowledge they've got MTHFR or they're producing too many pyrols, then they really do need to have strategies in place for eating better. To say, nothing helps, I can't, get my head around, it's like not good enough. You need to this is one way people can help themselves. Yeah. It's empowering. It changes their outcomes. It reduces symptoms. It makes them feel better and more confident as they start realising, I am doing some of the finer tasks, such as cooking for myself. Nothing more empowering.
Yeah, that actually is. One of the things I want to revisit here, and I just can't get it out of my head because it's something that I thought about, being diagnosed is, what, how, why me, good nor bad. And that's one of the correlations that I've had between everyone that I sort of know and so on was perhaps the vaccines we had as a baby and so on, because I'm 1970s,
Yeah.
And, some people say it's hereditary as well.
Yes.
I'd be curious on your take on that, about the hereditary, because my mum is clearly ADHD and I'd say my dad is too.
Yes.
So is that a hereditary thing or is it we've all had the same?
I'm glad you asked this sticky question.
Yes.
So
I think it goes back to your genes, I would say.
It does. So with our, we've got 2 parents who their DNA mixes together to make a new little baby, but we're also our own unique DNA mix from 2 people mixing. Now, if they've got the MTHFR gene or other genes, and one parent has it, it's 50% likely that the offspring's going to have it. If both people have it, then it's highly likely they're going to have a similar genetic makeup. Now, with genetics, and it's an interesting space, and it's a great question because I've been to a couple of seminars in pharmaceuticals where the drug was trying to be pushed upon people just because they had the gene makeup without the symptom. So that's kind of not that's That's going to the next level where, look, the thing I'm talking about here is called familial hypercholesteremia, which is a cholesterol gene defect where people make too much cholesterol. And if parents have it, then the children often do, and they'll make too much cholesterol. So the argument is, do these kids get gene tested so they know if they've got it or not and start medications early, or do we wait and see? Now, there's so many things around genes, and I think this space will evolve quite a lot with ADHD, and it's not going to be just MTHFR. There'll be other genes that will predispose people to having ADHD and anything on the spectrum, autism, Asperger's, or, bland affect or bipolar. We know that now. We've got that data now. Now, as a child, do you want to know that? Do you want to know if you're with no symptoms that you potentially could get this thing? It's a really big debate. No.
No, and especially as an ADHD, because some ADHD is anxious, like they have that comorbidity of anxiousness.
Yes.
And stress and anxious. So I'm not, well, I probably am, but I don't realise I am. That's really cool. Always, bury my head in the sand about that. But if you've got that predisposition of being an anxious ADHD like my daughter, that's what she'd hyper-focus on.
Yes.
And then that would stop you. I would say it would stop you from doing a lot of things.
Enjoying life.
Yeah,
Yes.
because you'd be constantly anxious about this thing that may or may not actually, switch on, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And so even when people request, I've got a natural medicine clinic, if they request MTHFR, which can be done on a blood test or just a cheek swab, I'll say, if you know this information, you need to keep it in context.
Yeah.
It's just a gene.
Yeah.
And it can be managed through food and lifestyle choices. So it doesn't mean, it's all up in the air, it becomes a hyper-focus. But when it comes to little people and youth, I agree. The debates I've listened to, it's because it's that particular drug I was referring to before in space was cardiology, and it's split. Some cardiologists go, no, we need to know this information so we can protect little people and youth, and others are going, but you're going to deny them of being a child. And for people who have a hyper-focus or an anxiety predisposition, you've just stolen their joy.
Yeah. And we don't know I'm assuming they also don't know what the side effects of giving them the medication for this thing that might not even trigger at an later age. They don't, I'm assuming, don't have the
longitudinal data for it.
Yeah.
We don't, and I think that's a really key point. Like, just because we think it's progressive and it's absolute and we've seen it work for 3 months doesn't mean in 30 years' time that was the right thing for a child.
Well, we've seen many medications over the year being given to people, and then years later they realise,
withdrawn
whoops. Sorry, we made a mistake.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think with genetic testing, it's got to be done with a bit of counselling around it. And I don't want everyone to go racing out after this podcast and get it checked. I would rather the take-home messages be, weigh up the benefits of any vaccine you might get or be giving your children.
Yeah.
Don't just listen to one source who's telling you, it's a must, it's essential. Make an informed decision.
Yeah.
Do your research. Make sure that the benefit outweighs any collateral damage, particularly if your child's already displayed ADHD or if you've got mum and dad or, put it in context and then make the decision around that. And with food, there's so much scope. Like, to me, that's where I guess learning to live with ADHD, there's treatment options, but there's also foundations for it. And food has to be one of those foundations. It just has to be, because let's just say someone is MTHFR, they need to be mindful of foods called oxalates. Now, I won't go into oxalate list, but avocado's an oxalate.
Oh, avocado. I love avocado.
So there's quite a few foods that people might love that they'll have it and they know, I'm a little bit more distracted in my brain or disordered, and it could have been that food.
Actually, interestingly enough, mine's bananas. For some reason, I can't have bananas. I don't know. I like my banana smoothie, but something goes off. So I don't know what's in bananas, but that for me is a
trigger.
A trigger.
Yeah, and I think, if people are just entering their journey into ADHD and they're really super keen to do as much for themselves as they can, addressing their food and maybe keeping a diary over a couple of weeks. Yeah, I know, for an ADHD.
We won't keep it up. Yeah.
It might need to be easier, like an app, but just become more mindful that, oh, God, what happened last night?
Yeah.
I went from being here to here. Oh, that's right, we had spaghetti bolognese. Okay, what in that is the problem? Is it the spaghetti? Is it the pasta? I'm going to try it again. Or or have a coach beside you, your partner or someone who might not have as much disarray and going on for them, so they can coach you through it and go, do you know what? I've noticed every time you have a coffee latte, you just go bonkers with it, and get someone to help you with it.
Yeah. And I like that way that you said that, be mindful, because, I mean, it is a bit hard when the mind for an ADHD person is going crazy. But one of the things, I'm really trying to help myself, there's superpowers, but then there's the downside. And the downside for me personally has got worse with going through perimenopause, and that's possibly another episode. But what I've tried to do is actually think about when I have a certain food, what's happening afterwards if something happens. So, and without even writing it down, it's like, and that's why I knew bananas, of all things, I wouldn't have ever thought, but things happen when I, so
have bananas.
I go bananas when I have bananas.
Yeah, jingle there.
More bananas than usual.
Yes. It's so funny when we get together. I don't have ADHD, but I could do when I'm around you.
She doesn't have ADHD.
Anyway, so I think the working out food triggers is important, even if you just work out one or two, and have a really high suspicion if it comes in a packet.
Yeah, of course.
Not a banana skin. I mean, that's great. You did pick that one up because that's a bit of a curveball. But certainly anything that comes in a packet, high degree of suspicion that it's going to have a negative impact on you. We're talking about sensitive neuro links with people with ADHD. They've got a very sensitive tummy. They may not get the gut symptoms, but they get the brain symptoms. And most of that's coming through our mouth.
Awesome.
So,
thank you. So thanks, Sam, for coming along. I absolutely love chatting with you about all this stuff and going from, hey, what were the causes of ADHD perhaps, some of the studies that have been done out there, what we can do naturally to help ourselves. That means that we don't necessarily, I know, some people will argue that we still need the medication. I'm sitting on the fence on that. I'm trialling medication, but I can't, I've done a few episodes. I can't say whether I think it's better than other things. I'm also exploring other stuff, as you know. So really great to have you come in here and talk about, the natural side that you're talking about, what you've researched and so on. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Any last, thing you want to tell the audience?
Yeah, I want people to listen to the content and context of what we've said and not get drawn into an anti-vax debate. That's not what we were talking about just there, but we certainly were talking about weighing up the benefit of taking something like a vaccine that, the professor from Israel who has a 500-bed hospital is categoric that that's created these spectrum disorders. He's a professor. So I think we need to be very mindful, it's particularly if, look at your history and make sure that the decisions you make from here on forward, the benefits are there for you and it makes sense because it's your body at the end of the day. It's your temple. Got one life and, make it a good one. So thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So if you found this information, find it interesting, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Follow me on socials. And if there is anything that you want me to discuss or you want other guest stars or you want Sam to cover anything else, make sure that you leave a comment. See you on the next episode.